Here's your cold open. Hello and welcome to Pub Goth Transmission, the podcast for when you're a little bit too goth for the pub and people start sort of looking across like, has he got black nail polish on? But when you go to the goth function, it's like, where did these blokes come from? They're just sort of sitting in the corner, sort of sinking pints and asking if there's anywhere to play darts. Today, we are talking about a particular movie that I watched. I sort of watched it in my childhood a little bit. Then I watched it. For some reason, it got in my head. I thought, I'm going to watch that again. And I've had a substantial bee in my bonnet about it ever since. And then I said to Adam, we should watch this movie and we should review it. And I felt very seen and validated that he had the same response to it to me, which is like, what the fuck? And that film is, right, if you don't know the name of it, if I say to you, the truth, you want the truth, you can't handle the truth, it comes from this movie. It's A Few Good Men, starring a young Tom Cruise post Top Gun. It's got Demi Moore. It's got a young Kiefer Sutherland. It's got a young Kevin Bacon, who, because I think all people look the same to me, all white people look the same to me. I was really confused in the movie at one point because I thought Kevin Bacon was Kiefer Sutherland's character, and it was only when they were both in the same room at the time that so I was like, oh, now it actually makes sense. I was extremely confused for a while. It's got Jack Nicholson. And who have I missed? Those are the sort of big.
It's got like Cuba Gooding Jr.
It has got Cuba Gooding Jr. Oh, and it's got James Hurley from Twin Peaks.
Yeah, James Marshall. That's it.
Yeah. Just you and I. He doesn't do that in the film.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try and outline the plot. And Adam, you tell me if you think I missed anything, and try and stop me if I start ad-hooding. Because I'm going to try and just go like a laser beam from the beginning to the end of the movie. Although it was quite a few weeks ago we watched it now, and I'm probably bits I'm going to have forgotten. So, A Few Good Men, it's set in, it's set in Washington, D.C., but it's set also in time-wise, like late 80s, early 90s. Film came out early 90s. The play, late 80s. It was originally written by Aaron Sorkin, who also did The Newsroom and The West Wing and The Social Network and like loads of shit. And it's got his greasy little mitts all over it. And basically, outline of the plot. There's these Marines on Guantanamo Bay. At this point, it's not a torture prison. It's just a naval base in Cuba, right? An American naval base, right? There's these Marines sort of jogging about as they do. They have a little jog about. One of them's struggling a little bit. He's not having a great time. And he kind of cocks up a bit. He's disappointing people. So at night, he's in his little bunk. And then two other Marines come in and they sort of wrap him in duct tape. And they put like a wet rag in his mouth. And he dies, right? That's your setup. Then you've got Demi Moore. She's walking through Washington, D.C. past a sort of parade of military stuff. I'm not good with military terms or ranks, by the way, so I'm just going to be saying like the military person that I can't remember the difference between a colonel and a general, and I can't remember the difference between a battalion and a division and a brigade or whatever, right? So anyway, I'm just going to say a military person, right? So she's a military person, I think naval. She's walking across the grass, walks into this office and reports to her two superiors saying, there's been this incident in Guantanamo Bay. A Marine's been killed by two other Marines. He was trying to get transferred off the base beforehand, and he reported an unauthorized fence shooting as opposed to a good authorized fence shooting. And we think that I think that this might be a code red, which seems to mean the superiors ordered him to be killed because he was trying to get transferred and going over their heads trying to report this situation, betraying his unit, right? So what happens is, so then they say to her, okay, that's very interesting. Do you want to go get a coffee? And she goes, no. And admittedly, this is a good line. They go, okay, can you leave the room so we can talk about you behind your back? And she's like, okay, of course, sir. They leave and they decide not to assign her. They decide to assign Tom Cruise, young Tom Cruise. So she's walking over to Tom Cruise and he's got his baseball bat out. He loves his baseball. Laid back guy, right? Just wants to hit baseballs. She's talking to him. There's this whole case you're going to be assigned, blah, blah, blah. And he's going, yeah, cool, yeah, whatever. I think, is this where she looks into his past and is like, your dad was like a big time military lawyer person. So it kind of introduces the whole daddy issues vibes. He's never going to live up to his dad, who was a great military lawyer person. He's just an okay military lawyer person. So he just wants to play baseball. He just wants to go for the plea bargain. He's the plea bargain man, right? He's not a court man. So then they interview the two Marines, and the Marines, I just have to point this out, that the Marines in this movie are depicted as fucking dumb as a wet tissue, especially the James Hurley Marine, as opposed to the other Marine who he kind of defers to, who's like the superior Marine or whatever. He like doesn't seem to like know what his hand is, like just really stupid. The other Marine seems to be slightly less stupid. So Tom Cruise is trying to say, you got this sweet plea bargain deal. If you plead guilty, you get 6 months suspended sentence, dishonorable discharge, blah, blah, blah. They're like, no, we can't do that, sir. We won't do that, sir. We were just following orders, sir. We did our mission, sir. We'll accept the consequences of our whatever, sir. So he's getting annoyed with them because it's like, bro, what are you talking about? And they're not going to go for his plea bargain deal. So he's going to have to go to court. So I think it's afterwards then that they visit Guantanamo, right? And they first see, they meet with Colonel Jessup, played by Jack Nicholson, who's the head honcho of Guantanamo Bay. And he's like just sort of sitting there on his table. And they start questioning him about it. And his vibe is like, I don't really give like, you can't tell me what to do. I run my base how I run my base, right? And he has the speech like, there's 4,000 Cubans with AKs trying to shoot me in the head every morning. And you want to tell me how to run my... He's that kind of guy, right? And a key difference is set up as well in this movie, because Jack Nicholson, who's sort of set up as the baddie, he's a misogynist. Whereas Tom Cruise, who's the goodie, he is a misogynist. So, you know, he does this kind of horrible speech like, because she's outranks him. And he's like, oh, there's nothing gets me hornier than being outranked by a woman, you know, saluting a superior female officer in the morning. And you think, oh, okay, I get it. They're trying to say misogyny bad. But then later on in the movie, Tom Cruise tries to hit on her and tries to kiss her or something like that. So it's like, okay, so there's misogyny and misogyny. But anyway, so they talk to him and he does the Columbo routine. Never watched it. I just know it from Peep Show, you know, when Mark's going to turn around. Just one more thing. Can I get the transfer order for Santiago? Because he's saying Santiago's the guy who's killed. He was supposed to transfer off the base. That's Colonel Jessup's story. So he asks for the transfer order, and Colonel Jessup does this whole, you have to ask me nicely. Yeah, I'll give it to you, but you have to ask me nicely. And he's like, sure. So you get the measure of this guy, big head, this guy, doesn't want to take orders. They get the transfer order. And then I believe there's a flashback. There's a flashback, and again, you see Santiago, the Marine's struggling, he can't run. And there's like a voiceover, he's writing these letters. I need to get transferred off the base, and I saw this unauthorized fence shooting. And then it goes to the office, and you've got Colonel Jessup in there, Jack Nicholson. You've got Kendrick, Lieutenant Kendrick, I think, something like that. Nailed it. I should be in the military. You got Lieutenant Kendrick, or Lieutenant, as we say in this country. And he's like the direct commander of the Marines. And then you've got this other guy called Colonel Markinson. He's also there. 3 of them in the room. And I think they bring up that this Santiago guy is struggling. He can't do it. And he's trying to get transferred off. And he's reported this thing. And Colonel Markinson goes, well, why don't we just transfer him off? And then Jack Nicholson sarcastically says the correct thing, where he goes, maybe we should transfer him off the base. In fact, maybe I should be transferred off the base. In fact, and he calls like the servant Marine guy, call the president. We're giving up our position in Cuba. And you're like, oh wow, he's actually got the correct opinion. But obviously he's being sarcastic, and he said, wait just a second. I think we have a duty to train our Marines. So make sure that Marine is trained. So you kind of get the thing from this thing that he did order that Marine to be trained, i.e., it's still never quite clear, but I'll get to that later, right? In my opinion, it's not quite clear. So then they're going to trial, and I don't know if there's anything really significant that happens after that, but they go to trial, and they start this whole. This is when it's confusing because Kevin Bacon is the lead prosecutor of the Marines, and I was thinking, why is the lieutenant in charge of the Marines who killed the person the one prosecuting them? And it was only when Kiefer Sutherland comes in the room that I'm like, oh, they're not the same guy. Oh wait, that's Kevin Bacon and that's Kiefer Sutherland. All white people look the same to me. But anyway. I have terrible facial recognition. If I was looking at me and Adam and I wasn't me, I'd think we were the same person unless we're in the same room, right? I'd be like, oh, the glasses one and the non-glasses one. So anyway, like they start, it's that classic final game in the sports movie where the first thing they seem to be doing well, and then the second thing it looks like they're going to lose, and then there's the big third act where they win in the end. So I kind of spoiled it, but I was going to spoil it anyway. So the first one, they're sort of like the main prosecutor's trying to argue there's no such thing as a code red, i.e. like there's no order to do this, and they prove that it kind of is, but it's informal. And then there's something with the doctor says, yeah, there was a rag, it had poison on it and it killed him. And what's never quite clear from the scene is whether the code red means haze him or kill him. Would you agree, Adam? It's never quite.
So it's in the way that Tom Cruise cross-examines the doctor. He basically points out that given how much Santiago was failing in the training, it seems like it's probably more likely that he had an undiagnosed heart condition and that the stress of the hazing killed him. So it was probably just manslaughter, but they didn't particularly care because they thought no, oh, this guy is just weak. And in the eyes of the U.S. military, if you're disabled, you're somehow like worse than dead, or you deserve to die. It's quite a fascist premise.
Yeah, and to be honest, all of it is just varying degrees of fascism, which we'll get into. But and then in the second, and then Colonel Markinson, the other guys in the room, reaches out to Tom Cruise and says, "Look, I know that Santiago was never going to be transferred off the base, and I can tell you that." And Tom Cruise wants to put him on the stand, and it looks all hopeful. And then he commits suicide, he shoots himself, right? Or unalives, or whatever you're supposed to say. And we're already going to be, who cares? Anyway, he shoots himself. And so Tom Cruise starts drinking, gets really depressed. And you can tell it's a sad moment because there is extremely heavy rain. Like this movie lays the pathetic fallacy on to like GCSE. I've just learned what the term is in English, levels of thick, like pouring rain when it's sad, big sunshine when it's happy. And he gets all drunk and he throws a big huff in, is it Demi Moore's house or whatever, and throws all the documents on the floor because they're working together on this. And then I can't remember what happens, but then he gets the idea that because Colonel Jessup is so arrogant, he'll get him on the stand and he'll insult him and bait him into saying that he gave the order because he thinks he should be allowed to give the order because he thinks he's the final boss of all this, right? And they do that, and that's when you get you want the truth, you can't handle the truth. And then Colonel Jessup gives a very impassioned speech about why he basically needs to be, kind of the dirty whatever, do all the dirty work, break all the rules so that they can have a whole judicial process. Like, I have to get my hands dirty so yours can stay clean kind of thing. And you get on your high horse and it wouldn't be there if it wasn't for me. That whole routine. And then to his shock, he gets arrested. But then the Marines still get dishonorably discharged. And the James Hurley Marine is so thick in the movie that he genuinely doesn't understand what's going on. He's just sitting there and goes, what does that mean? What does that mean? Looking at the other Marine like, I don't, what does that mean? And it's like, I have a feeling that maybe Aaron Sorkin or someone really has a disdain for the military in that film because they really are depicted as like, or the Marines specifically, because they are depicted as having an IQ of 4.5. Not that IQ is not a bullshit metric used for eugenics. But is there anything you'd add to that plot? Did I miss anything?
I guess we'll get into it. One of the things I found interesting about the plot is every apart from Tom Cruise, to be honest, every single person in that film agrees with Colonel Jessup. So at one point, his whole thing is like, I'm standing on the wall, and on the other side of that is all the things that wants to kill us. And they'll, you can sleep at night because the U.S. military is holding back the Cuban, the deadly Cuban menace. And if this is like late 80s, even like if it is early 90s, it came out in 1992. Sorry, what?
That's the main.
The Soviet Union's
right?
gone.
Like, and this is the funny thing in the movie is that, like, you're thinking, okay, like you say, this is peak US hegemony. This is when they have no one. Like the Soviet Union's gone. I think they've just done the Gulf War and just bodied Iraq and Kuwait. They're feeling invincible. 9/11 hasn't happened yet. They've still got a bit of Vietnam syndrome. They can't like battle an insurgency abroad because they'll just get bogged down. But like, they're the most untouchable they've been, maybe since like Bretton Woods or something, or maybe even surpassing that, right? The idea and the fact that Colonel Jessup gives a speech that there's 4,000 Cubans with AK-47s, it's like, and what are you, the most powerful military on the planet Earth, and you're scared of a few Cubans with small arms? It's and Tom Cruise mocks this speech in the movie, but he's mocking it because of the character of Colonel Jessup, or seemingly he's mocking it because he thinks that Colonel Jessup is a silly egotist, not because that idea is just inherently completely ridiculous. Like
Demi Moore's character makes the same speech. She makes the same speech to him, says, I says like, because Tom Cruise clearly doesn't like the Marines he's like defending. Right? She's like, actually, I like them. He says at one point, says, she says, why don't you like them? And he says, because they beat a weaker man to death, basically. And then she says, but these guys stand on the wall. They defend us every day. Which means that she believes exactly the same thing as Colonel Jessup, who is basically like, I can kill anybody I want because I'm keeping the Cubans
this is where
back.
I have to bring out the graph. Sorry, I drew 2 graphs, and I still have them during the movie. And these from my notes, you can see that this here is the political spectrum according to Aaron Sorkin. You've got the right wing here and the left wing here. And this is another version of it that I thought, because sometimes it doesn't seem like that. It seems more like they're constantly crossing over each other. Like every other scene, one of them becomes like more fascist than the other, and they kind of keep changing places. And one of the things that the Marines says, we have a code in the Marines: unit, core, God, country. And you think, okay, that's interesting. So what's the value system of like either Tom Cruise or Demi Moore? With Demi Moore, it's like, no, you got it all wrong. It's country, core, unit, God. Like you still do all the same stuff. You just have a slightly different order of priorities when you're doing it. Like the other thing that's surprising is there's this mention of an unauthorized fence shooting. So another person has been shot dead. Like it's unclear whether this killing was an accident or an ordered assassination, whatever, with the code red. But it's mentioned that one of those Marines shot someone through a fence and it's unauthorized. And the movie does not dwell on that at all, and only dwells on the fact that Santiago, the guy who reported it, went over the heads of his superiors. None of the time in the court case or film is dedicated to saying, wait, why was a guy shot along the fence? Isn't that relevant? And like the movie itself, even though Jessup gets mocked for his speech about 4,000 Cubans, does not dwell on the fact. It's like, hang on a second. Why does the US, at the absolute peak of its unquestionable hegemonic power, need a bunch of dirty work done on a naval base in Cuba when Cuba's at one of its lowest points because it's getting no support from Soviet Union and Chavez hasn't come along yet? Why would they be threatened? Why would America be threatened by a naval base they leased from Cuba in 1904 being attacked by a few thousand Cubans with small arms? Like the whole premise of why they need, like the whole sardonic speech from Jessup about why don't we just give up our position in Cuba? It's like, yes, why don't you? Why do you need a naval base in Cuba? Cuba hasn't been scary since the 1960s when it nearly got nuclear missiles. And since then, it's just been, in the 90s, it was a fucking wreck. Like,
yeah, and because of the ongoing blockade against Cuba, which is still ongoing today, of course,
and Titan, Trump,
it's,
the first and probably second
it's
time.
literally, so these are people you are starving to death. I mean, I think part of it is, and I turned to David Graeber for this when he mentioned something about how loads of centrists during the Corbyn era were really afraid of like show trials and gulags. The reason why they were so afraid of it from people that weren't going to do it to them is because in some ways they actually think that, you know what, given what they've done, it's actually quite fitting that would happen to them. And I think it's quite, I think to some extent the Americans do somewhat realize that, you know what, they do deserve what's coming to them. If it's not, it's probably not going to come. But if it was, fair play. I mean, when it comes to like, I mean, the speech that Jessup gives about, you know, I'm standing firm, eating my breakfast, eating all that food across from a place of starving people, some of them with guns, who I'm intentionally starving. This just sounds like your average fucking Zionist. Like, you don't know what it's like. On the side, there's no people that want to kill me. And then, and then I just have to say, well, yeah, there's a reason why they want to fucking kill you, because you should be killed.
Yeah, it's like you're like a settler in a recently destroyed Palestinian village. Yeah. So I have to eat my breakfast. Yeah, like, why don't you just go back to fucking Brooklyn, mate?
Yeah, honestly, like it's like with all the South Africans moving over to the States as well. So, and also a lot of them did move to Israel because settlers is as settlers fucking do. It's like you could simply fuck off and stop starving people around you and building like a giant concentration camp on someone else's place. Like,
I mean,
it's like really easy.
Even Americans back in the day, it's like, oh, did you hear family got raided and scalped the other day? So we'll just stop stealing people's land. Then get out of the Black Hills. Honor the treaty that you signed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's called not being a dick. It's just easy not to be a dick. I mean, but yeah, when it comes to the,
but I've said this before, on an even much looser term. When the UK bombs Yemen, I get nervous. I'm like, well, they might decide to have a pop. It's probably going to be stuff around the Red Sea. And what if they activate a selling Croydon? I don't know. I'm like, can you stop, please? Because like, I now feel kind of culpable involved in this. You know what I mean? Stop prodding these people and crying. It's cry bullying. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it means not like Yemen have defeated essentially the US Navy and
gunboat diplomacy. It had a good run. Gunboat diplomacy, about 200 years, solid run. Over now. Just at the time that the UK put all of its eggs in the aircraft carriers we can't afford basket.
Yeah, aircraft carriers for planes we can't use basket.
Yeah, I mean, we have onboard gyms where the big guns are supposed to be.
One of the things I think we have to talk about is what Aaron Sorkin is. Aaron Sorkin, like you ever watch like The West Wing or The Social Network? Mostly The West Wing and stuff like The Newsroom.
But I've seen The Social Network and I did watch The Newsroom.
I've watched a bit of The West Wing, but what I know about Sorkin is that he is a fan of liberalism. He's a liberal, but he's also a fan of it. He's a fan of institutions. He's a fan of he's not so much a fan of institutions themselves. He's a fan of the aesthetics of institutions.
That's what I was going to say. Like this movie, it's about like the institution of the court. When I say the institution, I don't mean conceptually. I mean the big wooden desk and the judge and his regalia, and he bangs down the thing and they follow a process and a ritual. And that's what makes it special. Not like the kind of philosophical and moral fabric that's supposed to hold it all together. Like it's for that whole movie, like you'd think, a movie about a killing of a Marine thing, you'd think it would get into some sort of topics, and it gets into just none of it. It's all about just, the courtroom and the courtroom, it's a courtroom drama. But it doesn't grapple with any serious moral questions. It's like you want a guy who, it's like, do you want people who uphold imperialism through the existing legal processes, or people who break the existing legal processes to, in their opinions, more effectively uphold imperialism?
Yeah, and different means to achieve the same end, because everyone in that room basically believes the same thing. Yeah, and I think one of the best ways to think about Sorkin actually is through the writings of a philosopher called Walter Benjamin. So at one point, Walter Benjamin defines fascism as the aestheticization of politics. Now, what the fuck does that mean? So aestheticization means like to make something like rooted around aesthetics. Aesthetics is usually meant in terms of art and visuals, but it really means about feeling. And one of the things that he says that fascism does, and it was the fascism eventually that killed him as he was fleeing Nazi-occupied Paris down to Spain. Walter Benjamin was a Jewish scholar. He says that to aestheticize politics means that politics works in such a way that rather than you actually being empowered, you just feel empowered. It gives you the feeling of empowerment.
Take back control.
Yeah, and so even though, like, you know, a fascist might be in a sense empowered to kill like his like Jewish neighbors or whatever, and many of them were indeed, and that, of course, the Romani people as well, homosexuals, communists, loads of different people. In a way, they were still not fully empowered to do it in the sense of, yeah, they were doing it in the direction of a higher institutional force, which meant if they ever disagreed with it, they would come on the side of it, and then they would be shot. Whereas if they were actually empowered, you know, they wouldn't. Empowered people don't need Führers. The Führer, literally the leader, the driver. And I think one of the things that Sorkin does is because he gives you the aesthetics of process, you get to feel empowered by participating in the process itself, even if you're completely powerless within it. So the people who love Sorkin the most, really, are British journalists. They love the aesthetics of process. So when Starmer was, we said, like, oh, he's a top lawyer, he's forensic, he knows how to write a memo. Oh, it's Mr. Darcy in Bridget Jones's Diary based on him. They love the aesthetics of competence. They love the aesthetics of, like, this man has been in institutions for ages. He knows what to. He's sensible. He's formal. He's, we want a sensible centrist, and that's just the appearance of competence, and the appearance of a good suit, the appearance of dinner party conversation that can have him as a kind of, oh yes, a very sensible, good chap. And in the same time, he's not actually empowered. He doesn't actually control the economy. He doesn't control anything. All he controls is his own media management strategy, and he's shit at that.
He controls looking like he's in control. But I think there's another component to this, which is that a lot of people's politics aren't, I think I've said this before, aren't really rooted in their own sense of moral values and how they see the world. They're rooted in what they kind of perceive as what the kind of normal thing is, and institutions are a good anchor for that. Like the law, for example. Like, I can't remember who was saying this. I think it was a famous person. And, like, it's good that people are speaking out against Trump. They're saying he's deporting people without due process. And it's like, you could have just said the first bit. You know what I mean? It's like, what? So if they rewrote the law so you could just deport anyone you wanted and that could just be rubber stamped through, it would be fine now, would it? And that's why I think a lot of people who are kind of in the center, or moderates or centrists, who think that the middle thing is always right, they're almost like a dog chasing the laser beam around, depending on where the Overton window shifts, because they're looking for a kind of sense of normalcy. They're looking for a sense of, like, what they think their institution should do as an anchor, because then you don't have to really think about it and think about right and wrong. You can just say, well, the court and the judge, and he said this, and he banged the gavel, and that's kind of what they've anchored themselves to, the process and the kind of rituals of what they see as the normal, the right, the just.
It's the aesthetics of, how dare you, sir? It's just the idea of just, okay,
that's why they hate people.
Sacred norms. It's all about norms. And
exactly.
R.I.P. Norm from Cheers, who died yesterday. But
and it's
it's
where you get that whole idea where it's like people complaining about genocide by, like, shouting people down and being rambunctious. Well, no, they should respect the system, that even though the system's saying, well, we're, right now, speaking on Gaza, they're doing this whole pretending they care thing again while still spying over Gaza and sending the F-35 parts, right? But, people, if you shout something, you have to respect the process and everything. It's like, what? So it's more offensive to disrupt a meeting than to, industrially murder children.
Yes, they believe that.
Yeah, they do. You have to do it through the systems that are explicitly designed to prevent what you want to happen from happening, even if what you want to happen is the most sane thing ever.
And I think this is why I not hyperbolically, I do think this is a fascist film, because one, it aestheticizes politics by making you feel empowered by the same process in service of an imperial order. One which is very much explicitly anti-communist and explicitly uses the violence of starvation and imperial occupation and concentration camp building to defend this anti-communist position, which, if that's not fascism, I don't know what is. But then again, I say that the fascists did get most of their ideas from the Americans.
Well,
so
I'd like to plug
maybe it's still pre-fascist. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, to plug another podcast, it's kind of how Fourth Reich ideology describes the Fourth Reich as, rather than doing things purely
I
on
fucking love
force.
Fourth Reich archaeology. I fucking love
because
those
they're
guys.
lawyers as well, so they do bore me sometimes because they like to not just go into the weeds, but like microscopically measure the cells of the weeds. But I do appreciate it. But you know, they're kind of describe the difference to the Third Reich was let's do everything through force, and their idea is not that America is the Nazis, although they do talk about the connections. It's more like it's about the world domination aspect, that the Nazis tried to dominate the world, and when they lost, the Americans kind of took over that project, and they don't use the same direct force. They try and gain legitimacy and win people over, and this film explains that. You know, it's you know, you can't just kill the Marine. You have to do it through the judicial processes and make it look legitimate, so that most people go, well, no, this isn't fascism. This is just fine. It makes total sense to have I mean, to be fair, quite innocuous at that back in those days when Guantanamo was just a naval base. You know, it gets a lot worse.
And another reason I think this movie is whether or not Sorkin knows it, is fascist, or at least pre-fascist in a sense, tending towards it, is in service of an anti-communist global military empire. This film's legal argument, even though it gives us the feeling of legal power when they're doing the legal part, is it is a attempt to essentially through aesthetics make us reverse the Nuremberg decision. So the Nuremberg trials, if people don't know, were the trials held in Nuremberg of various Nazi officials for crimes against humanity, for the crime of committing the Holocaust, as well as starting the war, but predominantly, of course, most famously known for the trials of people for committing the Holocaust. And one of what's called the Nuremberg defense is that I was just following orders.
I was just following orders, exactly, because that's what they say.
Yeah,
that's kind of how it's set up earlier on. The Marines say, "Well, we're just following orders," and it's like, well, that's literally one of the most famous.
That's how they kind of get off. They're like,
that's kind of how they get off. Exactly. We were just doing what we were told, so we're just following orders.
We were just doing what we told, and they still get off anyway due to quote unquote conduct unbecoming, which I don't think applies to people who aren't officers, but so it's not a very good legal movie in that respect. But yeah, the whole movie is to
because they don't care about the actual law; they care about the aesthetics of it.
Yeah, it's like, so if the aesthetics are fine, the Nuremberg defense is valid because the Nazis looked evil. They had it's like the Mitchell and Webb sketch. We've got skulls on our hats. Are we the hands? Are we the baddies? And whereas the Americans have the stars and stripes. And so they can't be the baddies. Therefore,
But another
same thing as the fucking Israelis. It's like that's all they fucking do is they say like, "Oh, we are the most moral army in the world. We have a moral right to exist."
Democracy in the Middle East.
No, you don't. And people feel empowered by attaching themselves to the aesthetics of Zionism. Or actually, or you're not really being empowered. You're simply being a useful idiot for a government who are themselves useful idiots. Because the tail doesn't wag the dog. It may look like Israel is like controlling like the United States. No. They're an outpost. And we've seen that with Trump can be like
they are America's Colonel Jessup, if you will, doing the dirty work.
Yeah,
so they can
like Jessup is just a pawn at the end of the day. Like we don't have to, because the idea that Israel controls the US is an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, but really the structure of the US empire is such that it needs a place like Israel. As Biden said in I think the 80s, if we didn't have Israel, we'd need to invent it. And because it is a testing ground for weaponry, it is an outpost in the Middle East for loads of other projects, and also seems to be a somewhat repository for certain nuclear capacities as well. Yeah.
And another thing I want to bring up, another connection with this film, and I can't find a written source, but I remember this from the Behind the Bastards podcast. There's a certain Florida governor named Ron DeSantis, who you may be familiar with, but you may not be aware of what he did before he was governor. He was a military lawyer, and he was at Guantanamo Bay when it was a torture prison, and he oversaw the torture. And he would specifically pretend to be the good cop and speak to the people, say, "Oh, are they torturing you?" They go, "Yeah, they're torturing us. Really horrible. Really? What's the worst torture?" And they go, "The worst torture is where they tie us to a chair and force feed us something called Ensure down a tube. And if we throw up, they start again and keep force feeding us." He went, "Oh, I'll try and get them to stop that." And then he'd go back and say, They don't like the force feeding. Keep doing that. Don't worry, I'll figure out a legal way that it's fine, right? Enhanced interrogation. Now, what was the thing that inspired Ron DeSantis to, one of the things that he said inspired him to become this military lawyer? A little film called A Few Good Men. And another thing that my first takeaway from it, the thing that put the first bee in my bonnet about this film, was the fact that I watched the whole thing and it was apparently about ideas and politics and the law and everything. But you think the only person who gives a impassioned speech that effectively relays his ideas, because people like me and Adam will draw out what people that Tom Cruise's ideologies and whatever by what they say and what they do. But no, he makes a big speech and lays out, this is what I believe. You can't handle the truth. You need people like me. And he's the only one that actually states an impassioned case about anything. So if you were coming away from that movie as like a blank slate, you most likely, that's what does anyone, even if you haven't heard of A Few Good Men, you've heard of you want the truth, you can't handle the truth, and maybe other parts of the speech. People, the way people remember the movie, that's the only bit they remember, and it's the out and out fascism that people remember and comes across the most convincing in the film, because the sort of liberal counterpoint given through like Cruise or Demi Moore is really not very far away from it, and in some ways more fascist, and in other ways just put through the yes, but technically, sir, you broke the rules, you broke the law, so haha, checkmate, I was technically correct, the best kind of correct, so actually I win and you lose, movie over, hooray.
Yep, and it's one of the only sort of moral points of the movie it tries to make is that the thing that's wrong with all this, even though we all believe in the same thing, is that Santiago was weak, and the point of the Marines, the big guys, the United States, is we save lives and we stand up for the little guy. Well, cool. This is bollocks, but I guess
heard of a little
depends
country
what
called
the US
Cuba that could be considered the little.
Yeah. Yeah, the little guy. Yeah, the little guy is. I find interesting. Because to be the little guy, you have to be inside the fence.
And I'm sorry, I just want to bring you back to another point. The unauthorized fence shooting, not mentioned in the movie. Tom Cruise doesn't seem to care about the Cuban who is shot through a fence. He's not the little guy. No, it's the Marine who's a bit poorly. He's the little guy who should be looked out for, not some random Donnie who's strayed too close to the fence of Guantanamo Bay.
So this is because of American ideology. So because the little guy, because he's a little guy, isn't always an individual, and Americans, capitalists, do not understand, and anyone who's a capitalist really does not understand. Typically, Cold War propaganda looked at communist peoples and saw them as not being individual. It's almost being a one great mass, like zombies or Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah,
and they think they don't have individuality. It's the same sort of Orientalist readings of China. It's like, there's just something more collectivist about them. It's what's called the Lee Kuan Yew hypothesis. It's bollocks. And ultimately, because they think that we're standing up for the little guy, the little guy always has to be a capitalist, because the little guy is always an individual.
Yeah.
Whereas, like communists, anyone who's not on the US side, they're a collective. They're a faceless mass.
Yeah, they're not a person. They're just a red.
Yeah. And so the little guy has to always show his face to you, has to be deferent to you. And if he submits himself, then, as for example, at becoming a Marine, then you can be looked after. So it reminds me a lot, actually, of so a while ago I did a podcast interviewing this really excellent scholar of architecture, writes lots of books about architecture and housing, called Owen Hatherley, and we were talking about his book on New York, and he's talking about how in New York there's no I fucking hate that city, but he did talk about one cool thing, which was there's loads of housing cooperatives, even though there's not what we would know as council housing. And he said a lot of this was started up by socialists. There would be pictures of Marx and Engels, Lassalle, all of the great socialist heroes. A lot of these housing cooperatives were started by socialists. A lot of them were like Jewish socialists. And said, well, how were they allowed to do this? It was because it was run. New York infrastructure was more or less run by a guy called Robert Moses, who set the stage for a lot of some of the worst things about New York's.
Well, I've heard if there was a Mount Rushmore of racism, he'd be one of the heads on it.
Yes, he real big on redlining. But basically the deal was that they could be socialists on the basis that they couldn't be communists. So Americans could look out for the little guy and allow these housing cooperatives to solve a housing shortage on the basis that at the end, Empire came first. Although it's interesting comparing that to the code of, say, like, you said it's unit first, then it's core, then it's God, then it's country. And that also feels predominantly quite fascist, because it's not even you're serving your unit because they can kill you, and then your core, which is the unit of units, then it's gods, which okay, fine, and then it's country, which is like, and it's interesting to see something like unit, core, god, country. All of the ideological components really are intensified in those three, and then country is just like, oh, politicians run that, they don't understand what we do. Exactly. And the military treats itself as a kind of a core that's kind of free, let's say, from the political institution, and therefore can defend it against itself. So the military takes precedence over democracy. It's a kind of a
same with the policing dramas. The politicians are always trying to
I guess
regulate.
In German,
it
would be called a kind of a fry core, I guess, if we were to call it that in the German term, quite literally. And the view of the military is they're just a kind of fascist like empire that defends us. They're kind of just the guys we have to do all the dirty work, and then democracy just kind of gets in the way. But we have to respect that democracy because we're the people who give them that power, even though apparently they already have
the idea of it. But not it actually existing. It's kind of a bit like how they talk about the NHS. A lot of politicians who really want to destroy the NHS. Like, we love the NHS. They hold up sort of the logo of the NHS while destroying everything that isn't just the idea and immediate image of the NHS.
I also think it's quite funny as well that Tom Cruise's character is like a nepo baby. Like, his dad's name is Blue on Wikipedia. If they had, if we looked at him now and he actually said his dad's name would be Blue on Wikipedia, and he's like trying to do this. So this democratic institution, there's like, well, no, at least an institution of a democratic state, it's fighting against this militaristic, almost quite fascistic culture of the Marines, but it's not really a democracy. It's kind of just a nepotism-based system, because not only is Tom Cruise's dad a big guy, and that's how he got into it, and everyone's like, oh yeah, you're not as good as your dad. He's the chain of command is also constantly just like being disrespected in a weird way, mostly because Tom Cruise keeps sexually harassing a woman who is his superior officer. And it just kind of if anything, I think someone like Ron DeSantis might look at this movie and think, well, Jessup's clearly right, because if you look at these great democratic institutions and their lawyers, they're all children of famous people, famous lawyers in the same fields, and they don't even respect their own chain of commands. Whereas Nicholson's lot, they do respect the chain of command. So if anything, by the standards of the Marines, the democratic institutions are doing exactly the same bad things as them, but without the justification of serving the purpose of anti-communist imperialism.
And the justification of actually like sort of believing in something that isn't just the process. Because that's the thing. It's like you come away from it and you're like, the only memorable bit is the bit that Jessup says at the end, Nicholson, because they're depicted as actually like having this code and they believe in something. Whereas the other side is like, yes, but we follow the law and the processes. But it's like what I said before, it's like how I was saying, a lot of people politically in the middle don't really have a set of morals that they anchor their politics to. The people on the left do, but also people on like the right and far right do have that. It's horrible what they believe and it's totally wrong. But when it ends up being far right versus someone in the middle, because the people in the middle don't really believe in anything, the people on the right end up sounding way more convincing, because there's no left winger to say, why the fuck do you even have a naval base in Cuba still? What about the bloke across the fence, which basically all the things that we're saying? Like, it's like the liberals try and confront the far right, but they've got no ammo because they don't really believe in anything that can actually confront it, other than, well, just trust the process, follow the law. You can deport people, but due process.
Yeah, there is no anti-institutional
politics. If you have a judge
politics
that says it's okay, then it's fine. But if there's no judge, then it's wrong.
Because there's no anti-institutional politics, someone like Sorkin can never question an institution's right to exist, or anything that's already set up's right to exist. It's inherently conservative. This applies to Israel, and it applies to ICE, Department of Homeland Security. ICE is not very old, but as soon as you make an institution, the idea that you could abolish it becomes completely anathema, because there's no negativity to anything these liberals do. And so when you get someone like in the UK, like Farage showing up, or even like Musk and the cunts at Doge, and just being like, we're going to like destroy loads of things. A lot of people do think, oh, okay, so the things that determine all of our lives aren't set in stone. Like, they're not going to
Yeah.
make people's lives better, even though they'll tell them that. But because they get the feeling that they want the institutions that dominate their lives to fuck off.
Yeah.
And then Musk and Trump say, we're going to make the people that make your life worse fuck off. And you might not know who those people are. They might just give you a wrong image of it.
Same with Brexit. They back control, you know?
Yeah, it's like it's people just basically voting like, I'm going to tell people vote Brexit for one reason, to tell people to fuck off.
Yeah.
And to be fair, completely honestly, valid.
Yeah.
Like, at the point you're just like, okay, I want I want all of these people who keep telling me what to do to fuck off, because my life isn't getting better.
The people who are allowed to be in a position to rake in the energy of I want people to fuck off, want those people to fuck off, are worse than those people. That's the problem, because the people who want those people to fuck off, who are better than those people, they're not allowed anywhere near that position.
Yeah, I mean, people like the mainstream electoral left, I guess, like their socialist campaign group or
There's
Momentum.
a mainstream electoral left?
Well, I think in terms of what it used to be, when I say, so usually when people say the left, they just fill in, like, they just leave that blank and they fill in whoever they're mad at. But I'm typically saying the Corbyn project, you know, in when he was leader of the Labour Party, the socialist campaign group, sort of Benism, Tony Benn before that.
Well, Corbyn's a good example. Like, that's what happens.
Yeah.
Like, you wanna try and say fuck off in a way that might make things better, and even your own party, not just like all the media that we'd expect, but like even your own party, like from every angle, will try and tear you limb from limb relentlessly.
Well, in a way, because Corbyn is the problem with Corbynism is he couldn't harness an anti-institutional energy in the same way, because post-war, you know, the welfare state is made up of institutions, and even though people may want what they provide, insofar as austerity has destroyed them, we don't really trust them. And I think that's part of what people get, like anti-vax and stuff. People don't trust the NHS to give you something, because if you've had the experience of waiting like 12 hours for an ambulance, or you know, you just had your doctor was just so stressed that you didn't get the medication you needed, or got treated like a cunt because you didn't
get the medication you needed because of a prescription error, or
you've never got any therapy.
Or you call a department, the dermatology department at Croydon Hospital. It's just a random example. You call the dermatology department at Croydon Hospital, and the phone just rings for 15 minutes and then just sort of disconnects. Then you try again, and it rings for 15 minutes and then just disconnects, because you're going to be late for your appointment because the buses were delayed because another public service is not doing great. And you turn up and you say to them, I'm really sorry I'm late. I tried to call. Is anyone like answering the phone? They say, yeah, sorry, at the moment we can't afford to employ someone to answer the phones. And then they make an error with your prescription. This is just a random example. I'm just hypothetically. They make a mistake with the prescription. So when you go to the pharmacy, they say, sorry, we can't give you your medication. Can you go back to the department? You say, no, it has to close at like 4:00, so I can't. And then you just don't have medication for another week. Totally random example, not bringing that up out of my own experience at all.
Again, like, people feel like constantly they're being let down by the system. So, okay, it feels like it's never going to deliver what is promised. It can, but it won't, because it's being run by people that fundamentally want it to be gone, even want to kill it slowly, or even like make it to a zombie thing where they sell it off to their mates and their contacts. Whereas Corbyn wanted to improve that, but he wasn't able to harness the kind of hate of I want this to fuck off. Like sometimes people do even though they want their healthcare to be free, sometimes people do want the NHS to fuck off. Because it's so under so much stress, it can treat you like absolute dog shit. It can treat you waiting too long. And even if it's systemic problems, it doesn't feel systemic to the individual.
No,
because
when
they can't articulate it collectively.
And you queue for ages and you say, I need my medication, 125 mg cyclosporin dexamine, and they go, sorry, sir, computer says no, there was a mistake with the prescription. And you're like, oh, so I'm just not going to be medicated. They go, yeah, can you speak to the department? No, I can't. They're closed now. Can you ring them up? They don't answer the phone. Yeah, sorry, I can't give you the prescription. And you're just like, I understand that this is due to systemic underfunding and everything, but still, I'm extremely angry at this entire institution right now, because I'm a human being, and you know.
that's what Farage ends up doing, because Farage just harnesses that I wish these people just like making my life worse would
Yeah.
fuck off. And the idea that they pitch people is, oh, so it doesn't matter. It's we're going to destroy these things, we're going to privatize everything, but don't worry, you'll have more money. And of course, that's a massive lie, and everything will become more expensive.
Or you
including
will
your
have
health.
more money, but everything will be
Yeah.
substantially more expensive, like is already happening.
Yeah. Well, no, in this case, we just simply don't have more money, and I think that's what they see. They
I
seize
have the
upon
same
this
amount
putting
of
things
money,
up
and
there.
everything has gotten substantially more expensive.
I have substantially less, and everything has got more expensive, but that's because of Zionism. My former boss was a Zionist. Just to clarify what I meant by that. Former because he was a Zionist. But yeah, it's the far right capitalizes on this stuff, and the problem is that Tom Cruise's case is only convincing to someone like Aaron Sorkin. It's only convincing on like an aesthetic level, and
Because
that play
yeah.
cannot keep happening.
Well, the other thing is like the whole kind of like unfolding and crescendo of the movie is the fact that like he, from going to a plea bargain lawyer to a proper trial lawyer and winning the trial, means he's like kind of solved his daddy issues in his inadequacy, right? And that could be a great movie, but it's about, like, you've set it up as being about this imperial base on Guantanamo Bay where a Marine is being killed, but the whole heart of the movie seems to be around Tom Cruise overcoming his daddy issues by winning the courtroom battle. And it's like, yeah, but that because you've made it about that and made it nothing to do, then you've just left the entire political space open for Colonel Jessup to clean up with his impassioned speech that is going to convince people like Ron DeSantis to torture people in. It's so ironic, this literally Guantanamo Bay as well. He literally went back to that naval base, but now it's a torture prison, and you've inspired him to be the worst evil person imaginable.
And it's the only sort of moral character of the film is what's his name, Malkinson. That's basically because he offs himself.
Yeah,
that's the only moral thing that like any US like officer does, which is just like, okay, I'm gonna dress off my best clothes and I'm going to unalive myself, I guess, as the kids say these days, because I've betrayed. I
think you can say it because I already said the one you're not supposed to say, so we're already demonetized, but not relevant.
Yeah, he follows his leader, and he offs himself, and but basically because he feels ashamed that he's given Tom Cruise kind of an into maybe taking Jessup out, and so he's betrayed the core, and I kind of feel sorry for him a little bit, because I'm like, dude, do you really believe that? I mean, it's because no one, because I think this is a good movie thinking about today, partly because of Keir Starmer, because none of the people in this movie have any ideas about what's wrong about the institutions, how to change them, and it's the idea that institutions are being failed; they cannot be failed. And I think Starmer is very similar to that in the sense that he thinks our welfare system's fine in a sense, but it's being failed because it's being offered to too many ungrateful people, or people who are cheating it, which is why he is intent. I mean, they know the research about austerity. They know how many people it's going to kill. They're doing it anyway. They basically said we are going to kill tens of thousands of people because they are unworthy of life. They keep sucking the lifeblood of the nation dry, and it still drives me mad. It's like,
and it's
they've decided that's what they're going to do.
It's capitalist realism as well, in the way that, like, apart from the blip of Corbyn and other things that have happened, after the financial crisis in 2008, all three major parties, Brown's Labour and then Miliband's Labour, as well as Liberal Democrats, they all agreed on austerity, right? All of them did. The only anti-austerity major politician we've had would be Corbyn. We saw what happened to him. So that's just like they don't think there's any alternative to it. There is no alternative to austerity and just continuing financialized capitalism. And people have been mocking on Trash Future the fact that Keir Starmer's making all these trade deals, and they're just capitulations to say, yeah, come and please, I beg you, come and exploit us in some way by setting up a business that we can pretend has made all these jobs, but actually we just have to sort of bend over backwards for you to destroy our domestic industry in that area, whatever it might be. But we already knew this. Starmer is if you cut him, he doesn't bleed. He oozes clear fluid. He is the Tom Cruise or Demi Moore. He's got nothing. He's got no real beliefs in anything other than just wanting to be in charge of carrying everything on the way it was going. A little bit like Biden, but at least Biden did some pro-labor stuff a little bit, for a tiny bit.
I resigned from the Labour Party as soon as he became leader, because I was like, this this guy is clearly a Fed. Like,
Yeah.
this is obvious. Like, I think the problem with the Corbyn moment was that it for some reason convinced people that the Labour Party was a force for good, and it was somehow taken over by Blairites. We have to go back to Clement Attlee and Nye Bevan. Like, Nye Bevan was thrown out of his own fucking party. Clement Attlee is the butcher of Malaya.
Yeah.
Like, you use Agent Orange on people in Malaya.
And
We
it
call
goes back
it
to what we
Malayan
said.
emergency.
It kind of,
Because it can be a war.
or as they call it, the anti-British War of Liberation. The reason we didn't call it a war,
right.
the reason we didn't call it a war, and this is true, is because certain companies in Malaya would not have been able to claim their insurance money if it was a war. So it was declared only an emergency, so that they could collect their insurance money if it was seized by the Malayans. But yeah, it kind of goes back to what we were saying before. Is I don't know if we were saying this on or off pod, but we were talking about how there used to be a red threat, a Bolshevik threat. So people like John Maynard Keynes, we said this before, their whole game was, what can we give people so that they don't go Bolshevik? We can give them free healthcare, guaranteed employment through counter-cyclical spending, welfare, social safety net, promise of social mobility, all this sort of stuff. And then the Soviet Union kind of fell apart, and then it switched from what do we need to do to stop them going red to, well, what can we get away with? Should we try this? Should we try this? Should we try this? And they've just kept pushing and trying. Turns out they can get away with basically anything. So there's kind of an inherent flaw in trying to harken back to this era, because it's like, yeah, but the reason that there were, people threatening communism if you kept things as exploitative as they were before then or now. There's no threat now. What, like, people aren't going to do it. It's not going to work. So you can just get away with it. Power never gives up anything voluntarily. So there's no need. There's no need for that kind of counterinsurgency, really.
Well, there's no reason. There's no fucking reason for any of these countries to still exist. Ultimately,
No.
There's no reason. So, why is Britain's reason to exist? So Britain itself, the idea of Britain was a union of the Scottish and English ruling classes that basically incorporated Scotland because it tried doing imperialism in what's called New Caledonia, as they called it, and it failed. So they basically united together to do imperialism. British Empire is essentially formally gone. And no one believes in the will of the king anymore. It's not being directed by him. So there's not really any fucking point apart from making like the city of London and a few thousand cunts richer. But even they don't really believe in the national project itself. So, okay, what other projects we got? So the US, okay, escaping from the British Empire. Okay, they've done that. Expanding across the entire continent, killing all of native peoples. They've done that. Defeating communism, in the sense of the Soviet Union. They've done that. So what they have to do now is keep positing a threat, and then because the threat doesn't exist and can't challenge him, they say, well, we keep doing the stuff to combat the threat, and it hasn't fought back yet, which means that clearly the threat isn't afraid of it. So we need to keep becoming more. We have to keep making ourselves more fascist to escape the threat that isn't there, and it's just going to keep spiraling and spiraling, possibly until we're all fucking dead at this rate.
Possibly. I think
because
we can have is at the ridiculous stage that it's reached, at least with Trump and big balls and Doge and tariffs generated by ChatGPT, is that they just kind of wreck the whole system before it can kill everyone. But I think that's a bit French intellectuals before the rise of Hitler complacent. So I don't know.
I mean, there's a statistic I saw. Let me find it. This was a statistic from, I think I've got it here. It's a statistic about, so it's talking about the amount of displacement that's going to happen basically as a result of climate change. So this is from Punch, which I believe is a Nigerian newspaper, and it's researchers from the African Climate Mobility Initiative. And so previously, the estimate of people displaced by climate change, particularly from Africa, was 40 million by 2050. The current prediction is around 113 million people displaced by climate change. Now,
Keep going. I'm going to go for a piss.
Given what we've seen with the management, quote unquote, of migrant flows happening, for example, since the fall of Libya, the civil war in Syria, and essentially, forcing people into various kinds of camps, in various perpetual refugee camps, the migration detention centers, the fact that the Mediterranean is a mass grave and so is the Channel, and they've now been increasingly technologized with groups like Anduril and TechNever, having drones in the English Channel, so-called AI-enhanced surveillance towers in the Channel, places like Yarl's Wood at detention centers. We can see them basically prepping for the flows of migration that are going to happen from countries that have been impoverished by imperialism into the imperial places that have impoverished them. And given what we've seen with genocide in Gaza and how normalized it's been by the institutions of liberal capitalism, and indeed of fascist capitalism, they seem to just want to repeat this all over again. It seems like the flows of migration are going to just be contained in a particularly authoritarian, eugenic and fascist way. And the problem with this is that the ideology of I'm always standing at the fence, defending, our ability. What Nicholson says is that he's defending Tom Cruise's ability to play baseball. He's defending the treat.
Against
he's defending
4,000 AK wielding Cubans in Cuba.
Yeah, the model is going to be like, I have to be a fascist military guy at the border, all these people that I'm intentionally starving and pointing a gun at, because you have to have your fucking treats. You have to keep your stuff. And if you don't, otherwise they're going to come and take our stuff. It's the reason why Israel looks like a fucking like Californian, like gated community. It's because it is one. Yeah. And it's like, oh, if we let all these people whose stuff we need come here, they're going to take our stuff, so we've got to kill them all. Actually, what if actually you're the one who deserves to get fucking...
And I read a lot. This is one of the things that kind of that shifted me a lot politically was realizing something really quite simple, which is, okay, as you just explained, and as is clear to most people, climate change is going to cause massive flows, unprecedented flows of migration. Right? When that happens, the existing order is not going to work. You're either going to have to shift radically right and say, well, they're not coming in, and then use extreme racism and fascism and white supremacy to say, well, they can't come in because they're worse because they're not us, right? And they're not Brits and blah, 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 blah. Or you're going to have to shift all the way to the left and say, well, we're going to actually have to radically reorient our society, let these people in and try and build a prosperous society that looks after everybody. That's the only rational way forward that's going to work. And unfortunately, based on how people responded to like the Syrian refugee crisis and various ones, it looks like that second one I said that maybe sounds quite nice to some people. That's not going to happen. It's going to be the first one that I said. And again, being on the left, it fucking sucks to be right. It really sucks to be right.
But we're right too early, whereas the liberals they like, oh no, we weren't so rude about it as you guys.
Yeah.
So because we went through the process
and we brought it up when it was too late to change anything. So I mean,
Yeah, this is what liberal Zionism is. It's when you want to erect a very sad memorial to all the people whose skulls you're currently standing on. The same thing with the States as well, with land acknowledgements, and Australia with land acknowledgements. It's like, well, we're not going to give it back, but we want to feel bad about it.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, anyway, that's probably a good place to wrap up, I think.
Yeah,
we've covered that was A Few Good Men by me and Adam, our review of it. And do you know what the other thing that put a bee in my bonnet is? I watched it and I thought, surely people have talked a lot about this. And I started looking up reviews of it, and like no one brought it up. And I think you brought it to my attention. There's that Kill James Bond podcast. They had talked about it. But that was the only thing I found that talks about it and doesn't like point out any of the stuff where you're like, what the fuck is the Aaron Sorkin actually want us to believe here? Because it is a baffling film.
The Nuremberg defense is invalid if it feels good and it follows the appearance of following rules.
Yes, exactly.
Which is basically Starmerism.
Yeah, and winning the big court case, regardless of the ethics involved, is very Starmer.
Even though, as they point out in that episode, it's a mistrial. Like Tom Cruise gets declared in contempt of court as soon as Jack Nicholson says, just before Jack Nicholson's about to do his big speech, and that means that actually he can't be arrested. It's a mistrial. So it's not a good legal thriller. It's a good
Yeah,
thriller that
like
reminds
I said,
people
it's about
of
the aesthetics of the law, not the actual law.
Yeah, and the actual law is fucking bad enough.
It's almost a bit like I actually haven't really seen it. I saw the Jaden Smith remake years ago. It's a bit like the Karate Kid, where people have pointed out that in the last thing when he wins, he actually fouls, so he shouldn't have won it. It's very similar in that regard, because it is like a sports movie. At least the last act of it is like the final match in any sports game.
If you want to watch a good movie about the law, My Cousin Vinny.
I haven't seen it.
It's one that's actually used in like legal legal courses, like a movie. It's actually surprisingly accurate about process. I don't know how accurate the other thing is about process, but I also recommend if you like legal shit. Not Jag, which is based on basically A Few Good Men. It's inspired by it, but Boston Legal, because it's got James Spader and it's got William Shatner, who plays a lawyer who is apparently amazing, but also just the funniest like self-absorbed old man ever. Shatner, like I don't know, whatever problems he has, big ups Shatner. Big ups.
Fair
I'm going to hear something horrible about him as soon as I've said this, but is William Shatner pub goth? There's a question. The answer's no, but it's still a good question.
The fact that he decides to release albums that are just spoken word versions of songs, there's something extremely pub goth about that.
So you can't be quite arsed. You've had too many pints. You've got too much wheaty liquid in you. You don't want to do the whole Marianne.
Because it's like a bit like Nick Cave or something, or or Tom Waits or something. So I'm going to sit here and I'm just going to speak words.
Yeah, who is a fucking pub goth? And I got a big ups. Let me find his name. There's a pub goth transmission section on the Acid Horizon Discord. Big ups K Sizzle on the Acid Horizon Discord, who is probably listening to this, who pointed out that actually the most pub goth is Andrew Eldritch himself, right?
Yeah,
he always denied being a goth.
Yes, I am not and have never been a part of the goth community. So I was trying to do that.
He's from Leeds. Yeah, I've never been part of the goth community.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do.
Yeah, he was in the provisional Sisters of Mercy, as opposed to the real Sisters of Mercy and the continuity Sisters of Mercy.
On that note, have you seen the Kneecap movie? Have you seen the Kneecap movie?
I've not really listened to Kneecap.
I
don't have a.
It's not huge quite my thing, right? It's one of those bands it's not quite my thing, but I think they're good at what they're doing, and I think they're sick generally. But do watch the movie. I think it is really good. I was very impressed by it.
Okay.
Both in terms of the comedy of it,
Kneecap.
Fucking funny, and a really good story, and it's just well told. I'd definitely recommend it.
Okay. Well, all right. Let's anyway. Get nicked by the police. Yeah. We get nicked by the police for mentioning Kneecap in a positive light, which is rare for me. All right. On that note, should we round off for today's episode of Pub Goth Transmission?
Let's round it off. Thanks for tuning in. And do you know what? We'll tack on to the end of this as instructable. I'll give you a little tour of how my tomatoes and chilies are going and the rest of the garden, so you can see how that's progressing. It's looking good.
No, folks. Dig for victory. That's the only aesthetic we're taking.
Dig for victory. From Arise, ye diggers. Right, and on the next episode, Pub Goth Transmission, and welcome to this beautiful May Sunday morning. I say May, end of May. It is the 31st. So, if you've been following Pub Goth Transmission, I planted out some chili seeds, planted some tomato seeds. Don't know if I showed the carrots, but I also planted some carrot seeds, and now I've planted it all out here on the balcony. I'm going to show you how it's all going. So, first we've got the carrots along here. They're doing pretty well. You can kind of see like a little bit of carrot forming there. That's looking good. We've got our hot plant here having a bit of an issue with aphids, if you can see them. A bit of an aphid apocalypse. However, there are a few ladybirds and they can eat like 100 a day, but they're going to need to get to work because, if you look down here, there's just millions of the bastards. But yeah, this is my hot plant, so that grows down from here, pops up every year. This is its second year. Up along the top here we've got our tomatoes. So we've got one along here. I call this the fishing rod technique.
because it's sort of like across a fishing rod. Eventually I want it to grow down the end there. So I've got 6 of these. That one's not doing quite as well, but it looks like it's recovering. That one's looking good. Look at that. And we got this one here, and we got this one here. And another thing I've done to varying degrees of success is planted some basil in the tops here, because it's a good companion plant. I don't think that one survived, or did it? Sort of. It's kind of under the bamboo for some reason. That one's looking alright, yeah, and that one's looking good too. So that's the tomatoes across the top here. Then if we go lower down, first of all, we've got some more carrots down the end here. These ones I planted slightly differently. I planted multiple next to each other, so I'm going to see how that works out. Got some empty ones here. I'm going to be planting some carrots out soon. Had some germination issues. Planted a bunch of seedlings in here actually, and they all just died, so I need to wait until the seedlings are bigger before planting them out. So we've got another tomato plant here, which is showing some nice flowers. This is one of the chili plants. I think this is a red chili. I've mixed up all the labels, so I do not know which is which. Basil, and all this basil is all from one basil plant from the supermarket, and I'll show on another Instructable how you can take one supermarket basil plant and get about like 10-12 basil plants out of it. By separating the stalks and cutting the tops off, putting them in water and then planting them out. So stay tuned for that. Here we've got, I think this is a pepper, but again I'm guessing. Another tomato here. It's got some little buds coming through here. This I think is maybe a red chili, or again maybe a pepper, but not entirely sure. A little bit of basil going here. This looks like a Scotch bonnet to me. You can see it's shorter, it's squatter. You know, it has those ridges on the leaves. This looks to me like a bird's eye chili, slightly narrower leaves. So this one, if it is, will grow very tall. And then we've got another tomato along the end here, and again some more basil. It's kind of funny yellow colour, and I don't quite know why. But yeah, so that's how the garden's going along. We're moving towards you know, I'll keep updated when the tomatoes start fruiting and when we start getting some action with the chilies. And for a bit of bonus content, this is a chili plant that I grew last year, and I brought it inside. These sachet things are all predatory mites to prevent spider mites from growing on it, because I had a bit of a pest problem. First it was mites, and it was aphids, and it was spider mites, and now I finally got control. But there's a good 20 ripe red chilies on here, so this is doing pretty well. If I can keep this alive and pest free here in this pot, it does pretty well. I've also got these two. These are actually lemon trees. I planted lemon seeds from lemons that I bought from an off license, and you know, they take something like 6 years before you get any lemons. And because all lemons that you know of are grown from clone, you don't know what these ones are actually going to taste like. They might be horrible, but the leaves have this lovely, they've got a nice citrus smell to them. So anyway, that's the update.